First contact through static. The signal came through at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, barely distinguishable from the cosmic background radiation. Dr. Elena Martinez hadn't slept in 20 hours, but she knew this pattern was different. The Deep Space Monitoring Array in Chile wasn't supposed to pick up anything this coherent from the dead zone, that vast, empty region of space where human signals went to die. Computer, run Analysis Protocol 7. She mumbled, reaching for her cold coffee. The holographic display flickered to life, showing frequency patterns that made her sit up straight. This wasn't random. The signal had structure, rhythm, and most impossibly of all, it was getting stronger. A sharp knock on her office door made her jump. Dr. James Chen, her colleague in xenolinguistics, stood there with his own cup of coffee. "You're still here. Your shift ended 6 hours ago." "James, come look at this." Elena waved him over, her dark eyes never leaving the display. "Tell me I'm not hallucinating." James leaned in, his expression shifting from tired irritation to focused intensity. That's impossible. The dead zone doesn't have anything out there. No stations, no probes, nothing that could. The signal pulsed, and text appeared on their screen. "To the inhabitants of Deathworld 3, locally known as Earth, we apologize for the intrusion. Please don't hurt us." Elena and James stared at each other. The message repeated in 12 different Earth languages, each one perfectly formatted. "They called us Deathworld 3, James whispered. "Why would they?" Another pulse. "We have been monitoring your electromagnetic emissions for some time. Your entertainment broadcasts are particularly fascinating, though we admit to some confusion about whether professional wrestling represents actual combat rituals." Elena couldn't help but laugh, the sound tinged with hysteria. "They've been watching our TV shows. Your species survives in environmental conditions that would kill 99.8% of known sentient life." The next message read, "Your atmospheric oxygen levels alone should have caused planetary combustion centuries ago. You drink liquid containing hydrogen hydroxide for pleasure. Your children play with domesticated predators. We are both terrified and impressed." James reached for the communication console, then hesitated. "Protocol says we should contact Geneva first, but they're right there, waiting." Elena made a decision. 20 hours without sleep made her either brave or stupid, and right now she didn't care which. She typed, "This is Dr. Elena Martins of Earth. We receive you, and are called cats, not domesticated predators." The response was immediate. "You name your predators, and allow them in your dwellings." Fascinating. "We have so many questions. Primary among them, how does your species endure gravity that would crush most sentient life forms?" "That's normal gravity for us," Elena typed back. "What's normal for you?" "Approximately 0.3 of your Earth gravity. Our scientists required extensive psychological preparation before viewing footage of your Olympic Games. The impact forces involved in your gymnastics competitions suggest either a fundamental misunderstanding of physics or an impossible biological resilience." James had given up on protocols and was now reading over Elena's shoulder, occasionally muttering calculations under his breath. "They think we're superhuman," he realized, "because we evolved on Earth." "Your assessment is correct, Scientist James Chen," the signal pulsed. "We have accessed your facility's personnel database. Hope this isn't an invasion of privacy. We are still learning your social protocols. But yes, from our perspective, your entire species consists of what our biology terms extreme evolutionary divergence. In simple terms, you are all superhuman." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "You haven't answered why you're contacting us now." The pause before the next message was longer. "Because we need help, and everyone knows you don't get help from a Deathworld species unless the situation is truly desperate. Our civilization is under attack by something almost as frightening as humans. Almost." "Under attack," James typed. "By what?" "By something that hunts civilizations, We need warriors. We need survivors. We need Deathworlders. We need humans. Will you help us? Elena looked at James, then back at the screen. She thought about protocols, about proper channels, about all the reasons she should wait for authorization. Then she thought about a species so desperate they turned to the monsters of their nightmares for help. She typed, "Tell us everything." The response came with what she could have sworn was relief. "Sending data package." And Dr. Martinez, "Thank you for not mentioning that humans also routinely ingest neurotoxins for pleasure. Our cultural adaptation team is still processing the existence of coffee." The price of fear. 12 hours after first contact, the UN Security Council chamber was packed with more observers than it had seen in decades. Elena and James sat between military advisors and xenobiologists, all staring at the holographic display showing the alien transmission. "They call themselves the Nexus," Admiral Sarah Hayes explained, her weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow. "And what they're running from? Well, you need to see this." The display shifted, showing grainy footage of massive ships shaped like elongated diamonds, their surfaces rippling with what looked like liquid metal. "These are the harvesters," the alien transmission explained. "They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They consume." "Consume what?" someone asked. "Everything," came the reply. "They strip planets of resources, including organic material. Especially organic material. Civilizations are their preferred target. The more advanced, the better." Elena watched as the footage showed one of the diamond ships approaching a city that could have been built from crystal and light. The beauty of the alien architecture took her breath away, right until the ship opened like a blooming flower made of nightmares and began systematically breaking the city down into component atoms. "Why us?" General Chen, no relation to James, asked. "You said there are other spacefaring civilizations. Why come to Earth?" The response appeared letter by letter. "Because you scare them." A murmur went through the chamber. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "Explain." "The harvesters avoid death worlds. The energy cost of harvesting such planets exceeds the resource gain. But more than that, death world species are unpredictable, dangerous. You humans especially." "How so?" Elena found herself asking. "You adapt. You improvise. Your entire history is one of turning weaknesses into strengths. We've studied your military history. You turned the physics of atmospheric flight into warfare before you fully understood gravity. You weaponized the very thing that should have killed you, your planet's massive gravitational pull, into something called orbital drops. Your soldiers trained to fight in conditions that would incapacitate most species." James cleared his throat. "You still haven't explained what you want from us specifically." The alien response came with what felt like hesitation. "We need you to teach us to fight. And we need you to fight with us." Admiral Hayes barked a laugh. "You want human military advisors." "No, we want human military everything. Your tactics, your technology, your way of thinking. The harvesters have never encountered a species that actively seeks out conflict for sport. Your concept of war games alone would terrify them." Elena felt a chill as she remembered their earlier conversation about wrestling. "You're not just impressed by our biology, are you? You're impressed by how we think. Your species turned the deadliest predator on your planet into something called a house cat. You race vehicles at speeds that tear apart molecular bonds for entertainment. Your children play games simulating warfare. You are perfectly adapted to turn any situation to your advantage." General Chen was taking notes. "And these harvesters, they've never encountered resistance. They've encountered resistance. They've never encountered humans. There's a difference. Other species fight because they must. You plan for fights that haven't even happened yet. You call it strategy." The room fell silent as images appeared showing the scale of the harvester fleet. Hundreds of diamond ships, each large enough to dwarf a city. "Here is what we offer in exchange for your help. The transmission continued. Full access to our technology, star maps, scientific knowledge, and most importantly, a chance to ensure the harvesters never find Earth. Admiral Hayes studied the images. How long do we have? At current velocity, 3 Earth months before they reach our closest colony, 6 before they detect Earth. And if we help you? James asked. Then the galaxy learns why every spacefaring race marks Earth with a warning beacon. Not because you're dangerous, though you are, but because you've turned surviving on a death world into an art form. Elena watched as military officers began discussing logistics, as scientists argued about technology integration, as diplomats drafted response protocols. But her eyes kept going back to the footage of those diamond ships, breaking down that beautiful crystal city. The next transmission came privately to her console. Dr. Martinez, you haven't spoken for 7.3 minutes. Have we asked too much? She thought about it, then typed, No, you've just helped us realize something about ourselves. What is that? Humans don't just survive on a death world. We've made the whole galaxy our home, and we protect our home. The response took several seconds. That right there. That's why we came to you. The harvesters consume, humans protect. And the galaxy needs protectors far more than it needs consumers. Admiral Hayes called the room to attention. First things first, we need to see what we're working with. Request permission for a human delegation to visit your nearest safe facility. Granted, though we should warn you, our artificial gravity is calibrated for our biology. You will find it insufficient. Elena couldn't help but smile as Hayes responded. Don't worry. Humans are very good at adapting. That's kind of our thing. The final message of the session appeared. Yes, that's exactly what we're counting on. That and your inexplicable ability to turn everything, even our fear of you, into an advantage. The harvesters are about to learn why Death World species are marked with warnings. They're about to learn about humans, warriors from a death world. The Nexus Station Harmony 7 had not been designed for humans. This became immediately apparent as Elena watched a squad of Marines bounce off the deck like children on a trampoline, trying to adjust to the minimal gravity. This is actually advantageous, Captain Maya Rodriguez announced, executing a perfect backflip. Lower gravity means we can carry heavier weapons. Speaking of which, she turned to their Nexus hosts, her grin visible through her helmet's transparent faceplate. Let's talk about your arsenal. The Nexus representatives, floating, ethereal beings that reminded Elena of luminescent jellyfish, pulsed with what she'd learned to recognize as anxiety. Our weapons are primarily defensive. Force fields, energy dampeners, nothing like your kinetic options. You mean guns, James translated from his position near the science station. They're concerned about our reliance on projectile weapons, Elena. Barbaric, one of the Nexus whispered, then immediately pulsed apologetically. No offense intended. None taken. Rodriguez laughed. But you know what's really barbaric? Those harvester ships we saw in the footage. Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire, or in our case, fight space horror with good old-fashioned bullets. The main viewing screen lit up, showing the approaching harvester fleet. They were closer now, 3 weeks out instead of 3 months. They'd accelerated when they detected the human ships heading to Harmony 7. They're afraid, the lead Nexus analyst, who had chosen the name Shimmer, observed. Your presence has altered their behavior patterns. Helena studied the data scrolling across her pad. No, not afraid. Curious. They'd never seen ships like ours before. She was right. The human fleet was a stark contrast to the elegant vessels of the Nexus, where alien ships were all curves and energy fields. Human ships were angular, armored, and bristling with what their hosts politely called primitive weaponry. Your vessels, Shimmer began diplomatically. They seem very sturdy, James suggested. Aggressive, Shimmer finished. The energy readings alone suggest you've weaponized your propulsion systems. Of course we did, Rodriguez said. Why waste perfectly good engine exhaust when you can turn it into a weapon? That's just efficient. The Nexus representatives exchanged pulses of light that Elena had learned meant they were having a private conversation. Finally, Shimmer spoke again. We've analyzed your battle plans. They're unconventional. That's one word for it, Elena murmured, looking at the tactical display. The human fleet was positioning itself in ways that seemed to defy basic strategic logic. Some ships were flying deliberately erratic patterns. Others were hiding in debris fields that should have been too dangerous to navigate. The harvesters rely on predictive algorithms, Rodriguez explained. They calculate probable defensive formations and plan accordingly. So we're going to be unpredictable. By appearing tactically incompetent, Shimmer asked. By appearing human, James corrected. You wanted Deathworld tactics. This is how predators think. We're not just fighting them. We're hunting them. A new alert flashed across the screens. The harvester fleet had changed course again, moving to intercept the human ships more directly. They're taking the bait, Rodriguez said with satisfaction. They think we're easy prey. Primitive species with primitive weapons. Are we? Shimmer asked. Ready. Elena watched as the human fleet continued its seemingly chaotic movements, but she could see the pattern now. Every erratic maneuver was positioning them perfectly for what was to come. Remember how you said we turn weaknesses into strengths? She asked Shimmer. Watch this. The first harvester ship appeared in real time on their screens, its diamond structure gleaming against the starfield. It approached one of the human vessels, a small corvette that appeared to be damaged and drifting. They're going to harvest the corvette, Shimmer said with horror. We should warn them too. The corvette exploded. Not from being harvested, but from a deliberate detonation that sent shrapnel flying at relativistic speeds directly into the harvester's crystalline structure. The alien ship's perfect geometry shattered like glass. Did you sacrifice a ship just to damage them? Shimmer's lights pulsed rapidly. Unmanned drone, Rodriguez corrected. Packed with ball bearings and explosives. Simple. Effective. Very human. The tactical display erupted with activity as the rest of the harvester fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. They'd abandoned their methodical approach in favor of full engagement. They're angry, Shimmer observed. They're predictable, Rodriguez countered. All their technology, all their power, and they still think like machines. But we? She grinned as the human fleet sprang its trap, emerging from debris fields and sensor shadows. We think like survivors. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. Human ships, supposedly primitive and outgunned, turned their very limitations into advantages. They used gravity assists to achieve impossible attack angles. They transformed debris into weapons. They fought with a creativity that the harvester's predictive algorithms couldn't process. This is why you need us, Elena realized, watching as another harvester ship fell to seemingly primitive tactics. Not for our technology or our strength, but for this, for the way we think. Yes, Shimmer admitted, your species doesn't just survive. You take pride in overcoming impossible odds. You turn disadvantages into advantages. You make warriors out of scientists and weapons out of debris. The battle continued to unfold, humanity's first major engagement in interstellar warfare. They weren't winning through superior technology or overwhelming force. They were winning because they were human, because they'd evolved on a death world where every day was a fight for survival. Send word to the fleet, Rodriguez ordered. Execute Operation Mosquito. Mosquito, Shimmer asked. Elena smiled. Sometimes the smallest predators are the most dangerous, especially when they hunt in swarms. The human fleet scattered, breaking into smaller units that seemed to flee in terror. The harvesters, their algorithms predicting victory, moved to pursue. That was when they learned another lesson about Deathworld species. Sometimes retreat is just another form of attack. The hunter becomes the hunted. Operation Mosquito revealed itself in stages. First came the apparent rout of human forces, their ships scattering like startled fish. The harvesters, true to their nature, divided their fleet to pursue what they perceived as easy prey. That was their first mistake. Remarkable, Shimmer observed from Harmony 7's command center. They're so focused on efficiency that they can't recognize a trap. Alina watched as the tactical display showed human ships diving into asteroid fields, skimming gas giants, and performing maneuvers that seemed suicidal. That's the thing about efficiency, she said. It makes you predictable. The harvester ships followed their predetermined pursuit patterns, their liquid metal hulls gleaming as they closed in on their targets. Each human vessel they chased seemed more vulnerable than the last. Now, Rodriguez commanded from her flagship, "Show them why you don't corner a species that evolved as both predator and prey." The scattered human fleet transformed. Ships that appeared to be fleeing suddenly reversed course, using gravitational slingshots around planetary bodies to achieve speeds that their engines alone couldn't manage. Others emerged from debris fields, their hulls covered in salvaged harvester crystal shards that confused enemy sensors. But the real surprise came from what appeared to be empty space. Stealth drones. Shimmer pulsed in disbelief as hundreds of small objects suddenly appeared on their sensors. But our scans showed no such capabilities in your fleet. James smiled. We didn't have them. We built them during the battle. That's impossible. The resource requirements alone. We had everything we needed, Alina explained. The debris from their first ships, the raw materials from the asteroid fields, human ingenuity. The drones, cobbled together from salvaged harvester technology and basic human engineering, swarmed the larger alien ships. They were crewed by Nexus standards, little more than guided missiles with improvised FTL drives. But they carried a payload that demonstrated humanity's greatest talent, turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. Crystal resonance charges, Rodriguez announced with satisfaction as the first drone struck home. Turns out those pretty crystalline hulls of theirs have a very specific frequency that makes them brittle. The harvester ship's surface began to crack, fracture lines spreading across its perfect geometric form. The alien vessel attempted to reconfigure, its liquid metal surface flowing to compensate. But the damage was spreading too quickly. "See, we studied the footage you gave us," Alina continued. "Their ships aren't just beautiful. They're perfect. Too perfect. No redundancy. No waste. No survival instinct. Unlike humans," Shimmer observed as more drones found their targets. "Unlike humans," James agreed. "We build redundancy into everything. We plan for failure because we expect it. We survived a Deathworld by learning to adapt when things go wrong." The battle shifted. Harvester ships, their perfect formations broken, found themselves hunted by vessels that refused to follow tactical logic. Human ships deliberately took damage to get into better firing positions. They used their own destroyed vessels as cover. They turned every piece of debris into a weapon. "They're trying to adapt," Shimmer noted as the harvester fleet attempted to reorganize. "Their algorithms are learning." "Too late," Rodriguez said. "They're thinking like machines. We're thinking like survivors." The next phase of Operation Mosquito revealed itself. The human ships that had taken damage weren't crippled. They were bait. As harvester vessels moved in to consume what they thought were easy targets, they found themselves caught in crossfires carefully planned by commanders who understood one fundamental truth. Sometimes you have to bleed to win. "Your casualties," Shimmer began, "are exactly what we planned for," Rodriguez finished. "Every damaged ship is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Even our failures serve a purpose." Alina watched as the tactical display showed more harvester ships falling into carefully laid traps. This is why they avoid death worlds, she realized. Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we understand something they never will. "What's that?" Shimmer asked. "That survival isn't about being perfect. It's about being adaptable." about turning everything, even your own defeats, into advantages. The Harvester fleet's perfect formation had completely collapsed. Their ships, designed for methodical consumption of civilizations that fought logically, found themselves facing an enemy that embraced chaos as a strategy. "They're retreating," Shimmer announced, lights pulsing with excitement. "No," Rodriguez corrected. "They're running. There's a difference. One is tactical. The other is terror." The remaining Harvester ships began emergency FTL jumps, their crystal structures still resonating from the human attacks. Some shattered during the jump attempt. Others simply disappeared into the void, their perfect algorithms finally encountering something they couldn't process, a species that had turned imperfection into an art form. "Send the message," Rodriguez ordered. Elena knew what message she meant. They'd prepared it before the battle, broadcasting on all frequencies the Harvesters used. To the Harvester Collective, "You have encountered humanity. We are what you fear most, a species that evolved on a world that should have killed us. We turned our planet's attempts to destroy us into strength. We turned our weaknesses into weapons. You consumed civilizations. We protect them. Remember this. The galaxy is no longer your feeding ground. The Deathworlders are here." The message went out in every format they could transmit, backed by footage of the battle. Let the Harvesters analyze it. Let them run their algorithms. They would find no comfort in the data. "They'll be back," Shimmer said quietly. "We're counting on it," Rodriguez replied. "Because next time, we won't just be defending. We'll be hunting. And if there's one thing Deathworlders know how to do, it's hunt." Elena looked at the tactical display, at the debris field that had once been the most feared fleet in the galaxy. "You know what's interesting?" she mused. "They called Earth a death world because everything there tried to kill us. They never considered that this meant we learned to kill back." The human fleet regrouped, already salvaging, rebuilding, adapting. They had shown the galaxy why Earth species carried warning labels. But more importantly, they had shown themselves something. The very things that made them primitive by galactic standards were what made them unstoppable. The hunt was just beginning. A new force in the galaxy. 3 months after Operation Mosquito, the Nexus Central Council convened its first-ever session with human representatives. The chamber, designed for beings accustomed to minimal gravity, had been hastily retrofitted with human sections, featuring Earth-standard gravitational fields. Elena watched from her seat as Rodriguez delivered humanity's report, still wearing her battle armor, a deliberate choice that hadn't gone unnoticed by the assembled alien representatives. "The Harvester threat has not been eliminated," Rodriguez stated plainly. "But it has been contained. Their remaining forces have retreated to these sectors." She gestured at the holographic map, where red zones marked confirmed Harvester activity. "More importantly, they're defensive now. For the first time in their history, they're the ones being hunted." Shimmer, now serving as the official liaison between humans and the Nexus, pulsed with what Elena had learned to recognize as pride. The statistical improbability of this outcome cannot be overstated. A pre-FTL civilization, barely a century into its space age, has accomplished what the combined forces of the galaxy could not. "Because you all tried to fight them like advanced civilizations," James added from his position at the scientific console. "We fought them like Deathworlders." The chamber erupted in a cascade of bioluminescent discussions. Elena had learned enough of Nexus culture to recognize the patterns: amazement, fear, and most predominantly, curiosity. "The humans have submitted a proposal," Shimmer announced, bringing the chamber to order. "They call it the Death World Defense Initiative." Rodriguez nodded. "The Harvesters aren't gone. They're adapting. Next time they come, they'll be ready for our current tactics. So we need to adapt faster, and we want to teach you how. Teach us to think like Deathworlders." A council member pulsed with uncertainty. "To think like survivors," Elena corrected. "Everything that makes humans seemingly primitive by your standards, our redundancies, our backup systems, our tendency to overthink threats, These are strengths, not weaknesses. We want to share them. The tactical display shifted, showing the new defense platforms humans had helped design. They were ugly by Nexus standards, all sharp angles and overlapping armor plates, but they were survivable, adaptable, human. Your civilizations evolved in environments that rewarded efficiency, James explained. Earth rewarded redundancy, multiple solutions to the same problem. Backup plans for backup plans. You see waste, we see survival. And the cost? Another council member asked. The resources required for such inefficient systems. Rodriguez smiled. Less than the cost of being harvested. We've run the numbers. Trust me, inefficiency is cheaper than extinction. The display shifted again, showing the aftermath of their battles with the harvesters. But instead of focusing on the destruction, it highlighted something else. Adaptation. Human ships jury-rigging repairs with salvaged parts. Emergency protocols that turned disasters into advantages. The very chaos of Deathworld thinking transformed into a strategic asset. We're not just offering military aid, Elena continued. We're offering a new way of thinking. The harvesters were right to fear Deathworld species, not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we never stop adapting. Shimmer moved to the center of the chamber. The Council has reviewed Earth's historical records. Your species has survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, multiple mass extinction events, and your own nuclear weapons. You turned your predators into companions and your poisons into medicines. Even your entertainment simulates disaster scenarios. We call those video games, James interjected with a smile. And yes, we spend our leisure time practicing how to survive catastrophes. We're weird like that. The chamber filled with what Elena now recognized as Nexus laughter, ripples of light that cascaded through their translucent forms. The proposal is this, Rodriguez continued. We help you build defenses that don't just rely on advanced technology. We teach you to think like a species that evolved expecting things to go wrong. In return, you help us advance our technology to better protect the galaxy. And the harvesters? A council member asked. They learn why every spacefaring race marks Earth with warning beacons, Elena said. Not just because we're dangerous, but because we're contagious. Our ideas spread. Our ways of thinking infect. We turn other species into survivors. The council chamber erupted in discussions again, but Elena could see the pattern had changed. The fear was still there, but it was different now. Not fear of humans, but fear of remaining vulnerable. Fear of staying predictable in an unpredictable galaxy. There's an old Earth saying. Rodriguez offered into the silence that followed. The best defense is a good offense. We're not just offering to defend you. We're offering to teach you how to defend yourselves, how to think like Deathworlders. Shimmer's lights pulsed with what Elena had learned was their equivalent of a smile. And how does one think like a Deathworlder? Step 1, James said, pulling up the designs for the new hybrid human Nexus ships. You embrace imperfection. You build redundancy into everything. You assume things will go wrong and plan accordingly. You learn to love backup plans. Step 2, Rodriguez continued. You stop thinking of survival as efficiency and start thinking of it as adaptation. The harvesters are perfect. That's their weakness. We're messy, redundant, and overprepared. That's our strength. And step 3, the council leader asked. Elena stood up. Step 3 is the most important. You stop seeing your weaknesses as drawbacks and start seeing them as weapons. Every species in this room evolved to survive something. It's time we stopped hiding from that fact and started using it. The vote was unanimous. The Deathworld Defense Initiative would begin immediately. Humanity, the primitive newcomers from a planet marked with warning beacons, would teach the galaxy how to survive. As the council chamber emptied, Shimmer approached Elena. The harvesters have sent a message. Would you like to know what it says? Let me guess. Elena smiled. They're demanding we surrender. No. Shimmer's lights pulsed with amusement. They're asking for terms. It seems the hunters have learned to fear something more dangerous than themselves, a galaxy that thinks like Deathworlders. Good, Rodriguez said, checking her armor's systems one last time. Fear is useful. Fear makes you prepare. Fear makes you adapt. And adaptation. She looked out at the stars, where human ships now patrolled alongside Nexus vessels. Adaptation is what Deathworlders do best. The galaxy was changing. The perfect, efficient civilizations were learning to be messy, redundant, and survival-oriented. And somewhere out there, the harvesters were learning why every spacefaring race marked Earth with warning beacons. Not because humans were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they had turned survival itself into an art form. And now, they were teaching that art to the galaxy. The hunt wasn't over. But for the first time, the galaxy was ready for it. Ready to think like Deathworlders. Ready to survive.